All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crucial Conversations. I am one of the co-hosts of the program. My name is Kofi Annan. I am the social justice servant leader for First Baptist Church of Vienna, and we really appreciate you guys tuning in to this program. Uh, the topic of discussion today is the war on Black history. As you all have probably seen in the news, it's kind of like the new trend for a lot of governors are attacking our how Black history is being taught in schools, and so we really feel like this is part of an ongoing war. It started with CRT, and now it's going for the AAP programs. And so we just wanted to have a discussion to kind of so that we kind of shed some light on this and kind of get your opinion on where things are going. So, but before I do that, I wanted to also make sure we take some time to introduce the rest of my co-hosts.
I'm Sheree Manon, and I am one of the Social Justice Ministry members.
Hi, I'm Rashina, resident millennial and associate minister here at First Baptist Church, also a member of the Social Justice Ministry.
Hey y'all, I'm Jaden Say, everyone's favorite Aggie, repping it for Gen Z, and I'm also a member of the Social Justice Ministry.
All right, all right. So the way if you tune into the program in the past, what we like to do before we kind of get into the meat of the topic is just kind of have like a little quick round robin, just kind of recapping some of the important issues or that have happened over the last couple of weeks. So I want to start off by first, at least one of the things I wanted to talk about was Tennessee State University. My alma mater has been kind of going through some attacks by the state, actually. So if I'm not sure if you guys have been following that, but basically a lot of HBCUs, historically Black universities, have been not funded the way they were supposed to be funded over the years, right? There was a lot of money that was withheld from these schools, basically because of discrimination. And so TSU was finally awarded basically back pay of like $500 million recently. So the state, first of all, they were reluctant to give it to them. Then they said, okay, we'll give you part of it, right? And so they gave them they awarded them 350 million of that 500 million recently, which could do a lot of great things. But now they kind of turn around and saying that, well, instead of just giving you that money, you just decide what you want to do with it, i.e., like, expand the school, build additional dorms and much needed dorms and things like that. What the state is trying to say now is that, well, you can only use it to improve existing infrastructure. So they're basically tying their hands behind their back. And not only that, but they're criticizing the way the school is actually managed their housing situation. One of the things that they've criticized. So it's like they're criticizing them for not having enough housing and having more students there than they could house, but then at the same time telling them that they can't build additional housing, and threatening to even take over management of the school and getting rid of the president and all types of stuff. So it's not a really a much talked about story nationally, but it's really one of our HBCUs have been really under attack for the last few weeks, and something that really should get a little more attention. So I just wanted to highlight that as my news topic.
And I think they also talked about there was some question as to why all these students are going to Tennessee.
Yeah. So
Tennessee State.
Yeah, so like even before they actually got the money, like several months ago, like they were grilling Dr. Glover, who's the president for TSU. They were grilling her about like why all these students want to go to HBCUs, like why aren't they going to UT or like and all. So a lot of these, I guess I'm thinking maybe some of these PWIs have been not meeting their Black quotas, if you will, and because everybody's just happy to go to TSU now. We're part of this whole trend with the Black Lives Matter movement. People are just kind of looking inward and saying like, we don't have to expose ourselves to some of this hatred and discrimination. We have a perfectly fine university here that we can go to. And so they've attracted a lot more students than they typically do. And so like a lot of the state legislators have been kind of finding that to be a problem. And I think that's probably part of it too. So
Wow, that's on brand. I will
yeah.
say. Like it's a running joke that we can't have nothing. Like we can't have nothing without people wanting to come in and buy. These children are going to, excuse me, young adults are going to schools where they feel accepted, where they are embraced by the culture, and people are just trying to take that away, and that's crazy to me.
Yeah, especially now, right? Like, we just won a Grammy. The band just won a Grammy a couple, week or so ago. Like, we have a football coach who's a former NFL player.
Right.
Like we're doing a lot of great things, and part of the reason why people want to go there is because people are recognizing the school, with all the different possibilities, and it's evident, and so like for them to try to come now and just try to cut our legs out from underneath it is really a shame.
And I think it just really relates as we look, and we'll talk more about it later on in this discussion, but we look at like the historical importance of our HBCUs, and especially these public HBCUs. Like I talk all the time about how A&T is the number one HBCU. A&T is also the number one underfunded HBCU. The state of North Carolina owes or underfunded A&T by $2 billion over the course of our existence. We were founded in 1891. 2 billion, that's billion with a B. And we look at how these states have systematically held our institutions down. And it relates back to the same thing we talk about all the time. Like if these places didn't matter, they wouldn't be working so hard to take them apart. And we look at the historical impact that these schools like Tennessee State have had and the impact that they still have. Like you talked about the Grammy and the football team and so many other things that Tennessee State is doing today. Like we look at the impact that our HBCUs still hold today. And it just reminds us how important they are and how much we have to fight for them. Because if we don't continue the fight and continue to work to make our HBCUs better and even to keep our HBCUs how they are, then who will? So that was just my sentence I wanted to add.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. So what else is going on? I think we hit the 1 year, the unfortunate, sad 1 year anniversary of the war in Ukraine last week, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Been a whole year. I don't know. So I mean, honestly, I think the year anniversary was marked by a lot of statements of resilience, but also some skepticism. How you guys feel? There's some folks who are saying like, how long are we going to be there? Is it going to turn into like another Afghanistan situation? Of course, Americans aren't dying, but things are getting pretty tense with Russia, and now China is getting involved. And how are you guys feeling? Are you happy with how your tax dollars are being spent?
I mean, I feel for the people of Ukraine. It's an unfortunate situation, but I also feel like it's kind of feeling like the war in Afghanistan. Like I know we're still early, but it's just like, come on, and we're continually funneling money to this war that is not our war this time. But there's other things that I feel like that money could be attributed to, and I just think it's a little. I think we could afford to pull back a little bit, particularly since now China's getting involved, and I don't think we really want those kind of problems. I don't think we want that.
China and Russia? Oh no.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know about our chances on that one. And I think to touch on a point you made, I think Tupac said it best. They got money for wars, but not to feed the poor. And I think when we look, I think it's definitely sobering to watch how the people of Ukraine are responding to the war and how they've responded. And I will say that their resilience is inspiring from a solidarity standpoint. But on the other hand, solidarity can only go so far. And when it really connects back when we look at like the wars in Korea and Vietnam and Afghanistan and all over the place where we address these issues outside of the United States, but we're not really willing to address the issues inside the United States
Yes.
because we're willing to send money and resources and weapons to go address the Ukrainian oppression. But we have so many oppressed people groups within our nation whose lives could be immensely different with that money right here in America. So the question becomes again, like, how long and how much of our money, resources, time are we willing to send out for somebody on the other side of the world when we have our issues right here and we could address these issues right here and change lives right here. So
yeah, so I believe that dollar figure as of 5 days ago, according to the Council on Foreign Relations, is 75 bill with a B. So
Wow.
that is a lot of money. And I don't recall voting on that. I don't recall my congressman voting. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
But when we want universal child care or free community college or free public college or free anything, there's no money for that. But we always have money to go send bullets across the world.
Right.
yeah. And I saw another angle to this that I don't think a lot of people really give a lot of credit to. Okay, let's say, for instance, I mean, America has defended the whole Western Hemisphere. And when I say defended, I mean like when Russia was encroaching in Cuba or anything like that. Like, I'm pretty sure we would push back in some way, shape, or form. We would be willing to spill some blood in order to keep Russia or China influence, if from our backyard. And I kind of see from the perspective of where Russia is like, hey, look, the NATO is expanding into our territory further and further. I'm not, it's not that cut and dry, but I understand that thought process of like, we need a buffer from the West because we do the same thing for other, superpowers encroaching into our territory. I mean, there's a reason why, Hawaii belongs to us. Like that used to be a sovereign country.
Wow.
So sometimes we could be a little forgetful and hypocritical about the way we approach foreign policy, so but yeah, I don't know, anything else worth discussing, and we could probably
the Fairfax.
Oh yeah. So closer to home, it seems like there's this topic is always relevant. Police shootings. We did have unfortunately another unarmed African American gentleman was killed here in Fairfax County a few days ago, and his crime, as far as we know, was stealing some sunglasses from Tyson's Mall. And it's seems pretty I don't know. It's just frustrating that we're here again, and this time it's even closer to home. I don't know what you guys thoughts.
Literally,
I have no words anymore. I don't even know. Like it's
exhausting. It really is. And then the last I read, and I haven't read much on it since I think. Well, I guess since the initial articles came out about it, he stole some sunglasses, ran into the woods, and he didn't come back out of the woods. And it was shot in the chest, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like,
yeah.
So he was shot in the chest. They were still investigating everything, looking for a weapon. To my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, no weapon has been recovered, right?
No, not as of yet. So it appears that he was unarmed.
I feel like the fact that it happened again in Fairfax County, as we've seen so many times in the past couple of years, especially like even in the era after George Floyd's death, where we feel, and I know a lot of us African Americans in Fairfax County feel like racism doesn't always apply to us because we've made it and we have our high paying jobs and our careers. And, you know, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, you know, we've made it. But it reminds us, like, Tyson's Mall is a mall that I've gone to. It's a mall that we've all been to. Like, this is something so close to home that directly affects us. Like, no matter how high you make it, no matter how far you make it, in one of the wealthiest counties in the country, this is still an issue that we're facing. And so often we try to, like, write off racism as something that happened in the past. But if we're not able to recognize the patterns and recognize it's still happening, we won't be able to reconcile or make any changes. So I think it's just really important that we don't allow these stories to go over our head, that we have to honor the lives that have been lost and these people, and stop treating these victims of police brutality as martyrs, because a martyr is someone that gives up their life for a cause. They didn't give up their life for this cause. Their life was stolen from them. They didn't wake up thinking I might die for the Black Lives Matter movement. That wasn't what they woke up wanting. He woke up, I guess he wanted some sunglasses. Like, he didn't choose to be a martyr for our movement, so we shouldn't choose to think of him as such. Like, he is a Black man whose life was stolen from up under him for nothing. Right. And we have to remember, like, these Fairfax County police officers who are continually killing us, clearly there's some thought that we aren't anything. And I feel like this is a good place to pause and remind us, because usually we do this at the beginning, but I feel like this is a good place to pause and say that all the statements made here are statements of our own, and should not be taken as statements on behalf of the church or the social justice ministry. Everything coming out of my mouth is my statement only. But back to the topic at hand, when these police officers continually treat us like we're nothing and throw our lives away like they mean nothing, and then invite us to the table and want us to sit down and reconcile, like, that's a slap in the face. Like, how many times do we have to sit down and tell you my life matters? And how many times do I have to watch you show me that my life doesn't matter to you? And then you still come to me and try to say, let's reconcile, let's sit and sing Kumbaya. Like, that's not the answer anymore in 2023. So let's investigate the root causes and change them. So whether that's reallocating funds to mental health programs, to other programs, to reallocating funds away from these police departments and funding community systems, like recognizing that these small things are not worthy of lethal force. Like, we look at this case and it really takes you back to George Floyd, because if you remember, George Floyd was killed over a so-called fake $20 bill. Right. The man in Fairfax County was killed over sunglasses. Like, these are not life or death. This isn't worth anything. And if you, like, why are we here again? And how many times do we have to go through the same cycle, see another brother dead, another sister dead, before we wake up and realize that we have to stand up and make a change? Because again, if we don't, who will?
Amen, Jaden.
Yeah. So you brought up when you brought up an important point that needs to be highlighted again. So up until the last year, before this new police chief took office, we either had 0 to 1 police involved shootings every year. We actually went a couple years without any police involved shootings. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but since the new police chief has taken office, we've had 6 now, just within the last year, right? So that is the definition of an uptick, a trend. Like, we can't ignore that anymore. We can't just act like it's just a coincidence or whatever. There clearly was some kind of message that is being sent, either directly or indirectly, to the department, that using force they have a green light, because they're pulling this triggers at every month or every other, whatever, like, and so a lot of times we see and hear about the shootings, but what we don't see is the other types of use of force that are happen a lot more frequently. So if you could imagine that the shootings have increased 5-6-fold, you could only imagine that the same thing is probably happening with all the other types of use of force, the beatings, the takedowns, guns being drawn, even if they aren't fired. Like, they're, so like this is encroaching on like emergency type of situation. It shouldn't be taken lightly. This is kind of like what we all feared when we knew that this police chief was going to take office. He came here with a track record of misbehavior himself. And we all thought that was sent us the bad message, and this could be, and this seems to be the worst case scenario playing out right before us. And so our county leadership definitely needs to be held accountable for this. This can't stop at the police because they put him in charge, and now we're getting the result of what they did.
Yeah, and they said that based on the evidence that has been uncovered thus far, that this did not warrant the use of force policy. So this is a use of force policy, and for Fairfax County Police, but that was not followed with this particular incident. So, yeah.
And then we try to act, and then oftentimes when these tragedies happen, people try to act all surprised, like we didn't know this was coming. And even if we didn't know for sure this was coming, we identified the pattern before it started. Because if you look back, all of us were there standing against his hiring years ago. Like when you look, when people tell you who they are, you have to believe them. And the police chief has proven that he is not someone who values Black life. And when we stood up against it then, we were told to give him an opportunity. We've given him his opportunity. 6 police-involved shootings and killings in the past couple years. That's unacceptable. So I think part of our job is having the courage to stand up and continue to say that we won't stand for this. And we have to be able to recognize that when people try to shut us down, like you might close your eyes and be willfully ignorant about what's happening around you, but that doesn't mean it's not still happening. So sometimes we have to force people's eyes open and force people to see the tragedies that are happening in Fairfax County. Like, this isn't Chicago. This is not Baltimore. This is not one of these cities that we're always talking about with high crime, high violence. This is Fairfax County. One of the, I would say, without a doubt, top 10 richest counties in the country. But we're still having police-involved shootings. We're still having these Black people dead at the hands of police officers, and we all sit around on our thumbs. So it's just another reminder that we have to take these situations serious, and we have to take action to stop before another Black brother or sister is killed.
Right.
Because if we don't do anything, that is going to happen 100%.
And I think and I guess to kind of go back to the point Kofi made about this being an uptick, I feel like particularly because this is Fairfax County, people may lean toward the idea that this is an anomaly of things that happen, and then maybe and then the victim blaming, he shouldn't have stolen the glasses or whatever. But I think it's important to note one, that regardless of whether he committed a crime or not, the crime wasn't punishable by death, and the police officer was not. He doesn't have the authority to punish for a crime. You enforce the law. You don't. That's not your jurisdiction. And secondly, we also have to address the issues of why are people turning to crime. I don't know that this guy just really wanted some sunglasses from the Tyson Mall. Like, he just really wanted those glasses. There may be some underlying issue, and I think that those are things that need to be looked at too, because it's all a part of the systemic oppression that has been going on in the country for generations.
Yeah.
So I think talking about that systemic oppression that's happened for generations is a good segue. The topic for today is saving our roots.
Go ahead. Make one quick note real quick. So the Fairfax NAACP did start a GoFundMe for him, and so I threw that in the chat. Rashida, I don't know if can our audience see that?
If it is in I can put it in our public chat. Hang on.
Yeah, this before we we didn't mention the young man's name, but we should mention his name. His name is Timothy Johnson. So just wanted to lift him up and lift his family up and let him know that we're keeping his family in our prayers as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, keeping that in mind as that guides the rest of our discussion for today. Our topic for today is saving our roots, Black history under attack. And we look around the country and it states most vocally Florida, but states like Idaho and Iowa, Louisiana and Kentucky, which are have either already banned or working to ban critical race theory, which is really Black history under the guise of this term that the right has really taken to. And we look at states like North Carolina and Virginia, where we're like, oh, it's not happening to us, but it's happening to us. And it really leaves us at this place. And it's like, where do we go? And we look at these bans that really just take out anything about our contribution to history. And for so long, we've been treated as a footnote. And recently, there's been a lot of work to bring our story into the context of the greater American story. Like I say all the time, probably the book that changed my life and changed my perspective on history the most is the 1619 Project, as it reframes American history from our perspective. We came here in 1619. We have been a foundational group to America, not just happy farmers who came gleefully to come help the white people pick their cotton. Like we've done so much intentional work in this time in the aftermath of 2020 and the riots and the Black Lives Matter movement, working to reframe our history and to honor our history. And we see the opposite effect coming on the other side. And I think a lot of our people think we did this work in 2020. We've read the 1619 Project. We've gotten these books. We've done the reconciliation work. But so we think we're done. But the question becomes, like, where do we have to go from now? And how do we defend ourselves against these attacks? But before we even get into that, I just wanted to ask the panelists, just what does Black history mean to you? And I know that's a deep question, so I can go first. To me, Black history means there's an African symbol that my mom is always talking about, and it's Sankofa. And Sankofa is a bird, and it's picking up a seed, and it means go back and get it. And basically, the idea is you have to go back and learn from the past and use that to carry you to your future. And I think that's what Black history means to me. Like, we have to look back to the successes and the failures of the past and use that to inspire us moving forward. So I'll open it up.
I will have to agree with you. For me, Black history, it means a lot more to me now as an adult than it did when I was younger. Because when I was younger, it felt like a holiday or something, like just something that we do, and it's just we have to go through these emotions. But now, just knowing what I know and learning more about African Americans' contributions to the country, to me, it means embracing culture and our heritage and how rich it really is, and even and how much of an influence we have had on American history. Because there are certain things, as things have been suppressed, there are certain things that I'm just learning now at my big age, that I did not know that African Americans contributed to this country. And so for me, it is just, as you said, reaching back and it's really inspirational. And I think that being able to instill that in future generations is just not only inspiration, but it's empowering for us to push forward and move the culture forward.
And I would say, for me, agreeing with everything both of you already said, but also bringing in like time to reflect and celebrate the contributions despite all the oppression, right? So we have just overcome and done so much, and has so many contributions to society, even in light of all that oppression. So that's kind of what I take from Black History Month. And to your point, Rashina, I feel like I learn something new every Black History Month. Even so, of the founder of Black History Month, I did not know it was Carter G. Woodson. I knew about Woodson High School in DC. Did not know that till this year. So at my big age.
For me, Black history is like the word that comes to mind for me is power. Like there is just so much power in knowing where you come from, and I think the European enslavers like understood that. Like there's a reason that like they could have just enslaved us and still allowed us to keep our culture, allowed us to keep our heritage and know about who we are and everything else. But they took a lot of painstaking efforts to hide that from us and prevent us from knowing who we are because of how powerful they that could be. Like if we thought that we only came from people who were enslaved, like that could really stifle your growth and limit your possibilities. But if you knew that you came from empires and kings that existed way before those that existed in Europe, and that you invented math and science and all these other things, like that's powerful message that I really think that most of our kids just don't even understand because it's intentionally hidden. So that's what comes to mind for me for when I think about Black history.
And just to piggyback on that, because I think you said something really, not no pun intended, but something really powerful there. Like knowing that we come from empires and kings, like most people, like I know one of the most influential things, like I had heard the name Mansa Musa before getting to A&T, but learning in one of my classes about Mansa Musa on his trip to Mecca, he was so rich that when he was giving away gold to local towns, he destabilized the economy.
Wow.
Imagine how rich you have to be that you just stop in a town and you destabilize an economy. Like they can't do their gold is worthless because you dropped off so much. Like imagine the amount of power you have to hold to be that ruler in that time. And when we look back at why these bans are being put in place, and that's exactly it. When we look at why they're so pressed to make sure we don't know our accurate history, it's that exactly. Because if we realize that our ancestors didn't sit down and take it, then we know that we don't have to sit down and take it either. One of the quotes I really live by, and I can't tell you who said it originally, but I remember it from Minister B, was, "I'm a descendant of a whole bunch of Black folk who couldn't be broken." So I think that really connects to like what's going on. Like we look at these states, Virginia most recently, I will say within the last week, the Governor Youngkin, he referred to his Secretary of Education saying that they need to review the AP course. And we look at what's happening in our course, and I find it very striking who's responding because it's only us. But one thing I really take away, I remember learning about the Holocaust in school, and they talk about first they came for the Jews, and I didn't respond because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for these people, and I didn't respond because I wasn't them either. But we are just the first line of attack. If they're coming for AP African American Studies, they're coming for Asian American Studies and Hispanic Studies and all the other courses out there. Because at the end of the day, we're all being held down by the same system of oppression. So when we talk about this solidarity and we talk about what's happening and how we stand up against these attacks, I think it's important to remember that it's about more than just us. And when we talk to our different partners, you're fighting for yourself too. So as we move forward, I think the next, just transitioning, like, how do we fight back? And I feel like I'm definitely in a unique position as a student at a HBCU who is, you see, surrounded by these pro-Black flags, who's a history education major. Like this is definitely right in my major area, in my activism, my advocacy, all of that stuff. So when we talk about how we fight back, I think the first important thing, and y'all can feel free to jump in, like the first important thing is making our presence known and making our presence known in all of these situations. So when they're developing the curriculum, we have to be there. When they're taking away the stuff, we have to be there. We cannot stay willfully ignorant as this stuff happens, because the longer we allow these systems to continue the longer the fight will be to undo these decisions made. So I guess my question for you all is like, how can we, and how can the people watching, like, how can we make ourselves present, and how can we stay informed of what's happening?
I think for one, of course, it starts with educating ourselves and making sure we know what the issues are, but then also getting involved at the very base level, like at the local level, in the school systems. I think we were talking prior to the broadcast about this woman who was at a town hall, and as a matter of fact, she lives in this area because she works for the government. And it was Prince William County, as a matter of fact, and she was at the town hall, the council meeting, and letting them know, I am not okay with what is happening in my child's classroom because you're teaching lies. So I think being that woman, if she may, I don't know if she was the only one there, but we have to keep making the noise. We have to keep not harassing, but making our presence known at the local.
Harass too.
Yeah.
Kofi harasses.
Nothing wrong with it.
Right. And she said, I don't know if you guys can do anything, but this is what my child is learning. My child is learning lies that nobody knows where early Africans came from. Like that's a lie. And so we have to be that sounding brass, that tinkling cymbal, whatever. We have to be the squeaky wheel, to keep making noise and show up at the local level, and all the way up.
I definitely echo that, Rashina, because a lot of times in these meetings, like, these county meetings, these school board meetings, we're really not there, right? And not present. But you see others, and they're there in full force, right? To get their agendas across. So to that point, I think it's really, really important to be involved in paying attention to what's going on in the school board, the local board of supervisors meetings, and just making sure that you're educated and aware, but also to the point of making your voice heard. So yeah, that's what I would add.
Yeah, I mean, I was really just going to say something very similar, so I don't really have anything additional to add. But yeah, just can't hammer home just how important it is to show up locally, and repeatedly and consistently. If politicians think that, all right, well, you might be upset right now, but next week you're not, it makes a difference, as to how they respond to you, because legislating is a long-term thing. You have to be involved in the long term. So like it definitely takes some commitment, which is hard for the average person, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I understand, like, everybody works, they have family, they have kids. And so you tell them, okay, well, now you want to take another hour and a half out of your day to go sit in a county meeting or to, whatever. So everyone's level of contribution is going to be different, especially if you're a working class and, or a single parent or something like that. The challenge is to really get involved into your local politics is difficult. So I do acknowledge that, but everybody can do something, right? Like we sacrifice for other things that we want to do. So like, let's sacrifice to make sure that we're heard in spaces that impact our lives too.
Oh, and I will say for Fairfax County, for sure, I know there are ways where you can make your testimony heard. You can do video testimony in advance. Those are things that we can do that you don't necessarily have to show up, but you can still, if you know the schedule, you can get your testimony recorded, uploaded in advance, and they will play that during the meeting. And I think there's also call in. There's plenty of ways to be there without physically being there. So that's good.
And notice we didn't bring up voting, but yes, vote here in Fairfax County. This is an election year, So vote. But notice that we spent more time talking about the other stuff after the election, which I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I think that's actually what we do. That's where the rubber hits the road. Like a lot of them, we'll put them in power, and then we'll just step back and walk away for the next 4 years or whatever, however long.
Mhm.
So,
Right. I remember reading something, and it really changed my perspective, because we hear a lot of people telling us, go vote, go vote, go vote, go vote. But it said something that was like, washing your hands, or voting is like the washing your hands of being politically engaged. Like, that's not at all what you need to do, but it's a good place to start. And if you don't
Absolutely.
start there, then how are you going to go get the manicure and get everything, your cuticles clipped and your nail beds pushed back? But if you don't start with washing your hands, then none of it counts. So you have to start with voting. And I think it's so important that we get out to vote in every election, because then we continue to hold the power to hold these politicians accountable. And what people don't realize is we are a block. We're an economic block. We're a voting block. We have a massive political power if we choose to mobilize and use it. Like, looking at the comments talking about Disney needs to move out of Florida. And I completely agree. Disney should move out of Florida. But until we as a community decide not to move our economic, our political, our social clout to encourage Disney to move, they're not going to move, because that's going to be a decision that costs them money. And the people who are vocal and their main demographic doesn't care about that. So they have no motivation. We have to remember the power that we hold as a people. So, and I think that really connects back to your earlier point, like, why are these attacks happening? And it's because of the power that we hold as a people. So, motivated by that power and motivated by these steps to move forward, we just have to remember, like, nothing that's happening right now is absolute. Nothing that's happening right now is the end. And I think oftentimes we watch these attacks and they unfold across the entire nation. Like, we saw how quickly, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, how quickly these abortion bans popped up around the country. And we see how quickly these bans against critical race theory and Black history and Latino history and Asian history and equitable history that tells the full story of America is being banned. And we think, like, there's nothing we can do. We're just one person. But we look at these coalitions and we look at these systems and these communities, and we realize that we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. So I think that's another important one. We look at these organizations that are doing important work fighting back. We look at these organizations like the Social Justice Ministry, like the NAACP, like these other organizations who are actively in the fight. And I think this is just another time for us as people to be reminded of the impact that these organizations had and how we can support them and how we can continue that work through them, how we can organize our work and how we can mobilize. So I think the next point is, like, how do we make sense of this? Like, this hatred, this destruction of Black history, how does this fit into the context of we're coming out of the pandemic, we're in the post-George Floyd era? Like, what are we pointing towards? Because by all measures, we're only going downhill. So how do we find hope moving forward? Where are we going, and how do we fight back? So I know that's a hard question, but if anybody wants to jump in. I think
in the context of,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was kind of searching for words anyway.
Right. I was saying that I think the biggest thing that we can do, the biggest thing to look at for hope is we go back to that idea of Sankofa. We look at when Dr. King was fighting, and we look at all the things that were held up against and everything they were fighting against. And I'm sure that in that time period, it felt insurmountable. We look at right before abolition and we think, like, slavery and the KKK, the Civil War, Confederacy. Like, we fuss about Confederates today, but imagine Confederates in 1860. And I feel like it's insurmountable. And I think sometimes it's important to remember, like, we're the social justice ministry, and sometimes we focus on social justice, but we're still ministry. And I think part of the reason we find hope is because we have faith and being able to believe that it's going to work out for the good of those who are doing things for Christ. And we know that our work is ordained by Christ. We look at the theological principles that back up what we're doing. And I think that really brings me hope. Like knowing what we're doing is God's will. We're doing it in his name, and being reminded, like so many times today, we're afraid to say that we're doing this in Jesus' name. We're doing this for the Lord. So I think it's really important to remember why we do this work.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're absolutely right. And you know, coming from just piggybacking off of the theological aspect of it, you know, James Cone is famous for saying God is on the side of the oppressed. And so I feel like you know, we've made strides and we've, you know, made so many strides. We've come through so much, we've overcome so much. So there certainly is hope. There certainly is hope that we know we can overcome this, and also just from a petty standpoint, they are not going to be the majority for much longer.
Right.
Like, they're just not, and I think
but that's the problem. That's part of what is all about.
That's exactly where I was going, and that is the problem. They're fighting that, and that is why they are fighting so much, because they are afraid that we are going, once we become the majority, once people of color become the majority in this country, because we are already the majority in the world, but once we become the majority in this country, that I think they feel like we're going to do to them what they have been doing for generations, and that's not our MO. We just want to. We just want to live. We just want to be. You know, we just want equality. We don't want. You know, I can't think of the word. We don't want to pay them back. we just want to live. We don't want revenge. We just want to live. And so I think that I think there's hope in that too, because like y'all won't be the majority for much longer.
Right. I also think too it's important that we, you know, as parents, as a community, do things to educate ourselves, because we know like don't let them kind of take that, as Kofi said, power away, right? So like when our boys were in school, like we had them doing extra stuff, like to learn about their heritage and their culture, because we know that they're not getting that in school. Because we'd ask them questions about, okay, so, you know, what are you learning about, you know, Black history in school? And it was pretty much Martin Luther King, maybe Rosa Parks, I don't know. So I think too, we have the power amongst ourselves to do things to educate outside of school. So I think that's important to note too.
Yeah. So actually, I was going to make a point that's related to that. So we do need to push for our public schools to do better. But I think this whole debate about the AP programs has actually highlighted an issue that I think a lot of people didn't really quite understand before, which is that the AP program is a privately run thing. Right. It's a nonprofit organization. So it's not even directly linked to the public school system. Right. So what that means is that, like, so when DeSantis came out and he made this, you know, basically banned the program and criticized it, all the points that he criticized the program for, they actually went back and changed it. Right. They said it wasn't directly related to his criticism, but it seemed pretty ironic that, you know, a few weeks later, the program has changed. So what is that, you know, including taking out something as critical as the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So now the AP program, which is really the only way you can really get a rich history about African-American history, you know, taught to you as a school, now that's being influenced by politics, right? So you're already not getting it. The masses of the students are already not getting it. So that the few who were getting it before are now getting a version of it that is possibly politically influenced, right? So it really highlights a bigger problem with how Black history is even taught in our schools in general. So we have to take it upon ourselves to make sure that we're making sure our kids are reading and things like that, in addition to fighting the fight for the larger, population.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to both of your points, like I think that really connects to what was my final point for tonight is that like we are the keepers of our culture. We are the keepers of our history. And I feel like for so long, like I spoke earlier about the 1619 Project and projects like it, which have been working to reclaim our history and tell our stories from our perspective. But I think part of that is just remembering our stories, recording our stories, recognizing the impact that Black people had. And I always connect it back to Vienna because we look at Vienna and today it's a very upper class white town. But you go back 2 generations and you see powerful, powerful Black people running stuff. You go back a couple more generations and you see Black people burning down the Fairfax County courthouse because it was on their land. You see Black people serving as Civil War spies. You see Black people having the courage to go into the workplace, having the courage to go into war, going to serve our country. And we look at the strength of the Black people in Vienna, the historical strength of so many Black people in Vienna that's been pretty much erased. And we look at that same trend happening around the country. Now, luckily in Vienna, we have strong cultural assets like First Baptist, like the people who are doing the work, like my mother, like Gloria Runyon, like Sylvia Taylor, like those people who are still doing the work to preserve our history. But we have to look everywhere else. People aren't doing that work. So I guess my next and final question really is like, how do we make sure that our stories, our history, our culture isn't lost, even when they ban it, even when they push against us and they try to destroy us? Like, how do we fight back?
I think it's to Kofi and Shireen's point is making sure we are educating our own children, make sure we are telling our kids, how great they are, who their grandparents are, and chronicling that. I spoke of your mom. I admire your mom because she's doing this genealogy project, and because there are things that we don't know just because we won't take the time to chronicle our history, or maybe our parents, great grandparents, they didn't have the time or the energy to try to push those stories down to generations. But I think we have to be more intentional about making sure we pass down our own family histories and make sure that our children know who their family is. Especially in the South, we have a big thing. You always need to know who your people are, but and that's not just people who are alive, but you also need to know generations back. There are things that I learned just having a conversation with my grandmother one time, and I had to interview her for a project in college, and I learned so much. I did not realize that her parents, my great grandparents, were sharecroppers. And she talks about the story. She talks about her mom and how the farmer who owned the land wanted one of my grandmother and her brothers and sisters to not go to school, to work the land. And she talks about how her mother was strong and she stood her ground to that white man and said, no, your children go to school, my children are going to school too. They can work when they get home. So I think those are stories that we have to tell our children, and if we know it, then it's our responsibility to pass down that information as well.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with everything Rashina said, and because we can control that narrative, right? So we don't know what they're going to be told in school, even with all everything going on, because we've seen incidents too. Like it seemed like it never fails. Every Black History Month, you hear some outrageous story about the white kids playing slave owners and the Black kids picking cotton. Mm-hmm. That still goes on, unfortunately, right? It's Loudoun County is very that happens a lot there, right? And it's like in this day and age, how is that happening, right? So I think we just have to do those things to control that narrative.
I would just add, like, it's we focus a lot on the kids, and because this is being highlighted how much they're trying to manipulate the public school courses and things like that. But like, we also need to educate ourselves too. Don't forget, like, we were also miseducated.
Mhm.
We were also victims of this same system. We're just now seeing it as adults. But like, our education journey should never end, because
Right.
we've also been victims and brainwashed and lied to and everything else ourselves. So we have these own demons that we need to exercise as well.
That's good. I cannot
Right.
tell you so many of the things I have had to unlearn as a result of just this is just the way I thought it was. Particularly respectability politics is like kind of like been my thing now, where I'm just like I I don't really subscribe to it much anymore. I mean, I know there's a certain level of it that we have to do to just try to survive, but but things like that, and why is such a big thing in the African American community. And it all goes back to racism. I swear, everything in this country, every issue in this country is like steeped and rooted in racism.
Yeah. So as we close out,
Well,
I just I just want to continue to encourage everyone to continue this work. Like as we've said multiple times, and I think we've all touched on it, like if we don't, who will? So I think like we're at a unique place in history as we continue to watch things gear up. And I know some of us, I know I thought it would blow up after the George Floyd incident and we would work and get some real substantive changes and then it'd be over. But we look and we're like, not much has changed since then. And it's been almost 3 years. And it's like we're
some things
almost
have
at
gotten worse.
right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I
Agreed.
think it's just we have to be intentional about taking this time to educate ourselves, taking this time to prepare ourselves, taking this time to learn about the injustices that are still strong in this country, and then work to fix them, work to make these systems just, make these systems equitable. And if these systems can't be reformed, then we have to make these difficult decisions to create new systems that serve our people better, that serve the original call of our nation, that all men are created equal. Like we have to remember the history of this nation, the history of racism, and use that to motivate us to continue to make stuff different, to make stuff better. So I just want to give y'all all the opportunity to any final words.
Great job, Jaden.
Ditto.
Go ahead, Rashina.
No, I said ditto. You go ahead.
Yeah, just we just thank everyone for tuning in. Really think that this was a very powerful discussion. It always feels like when we get to this point, like there's so much more to say, right? Like, but we definitely want to respect everyone's time, and let's keep the conversation going. This doesn't have to stop right here. You continue to leave some comments in the chat. We'll definitely try to monitor those and continue to have this discussion, with your family, your friends, your kids. Remember to vote coming up. Remember to contact your elected officials. Remember the GoFundMe. There's also a vigil for Mr. Johnson this Friday. I think the details have not been finalized yet, but be on the lookout for that. We'll try to see if we can post that information for when that comes out. Let's continue to hold folks accountable and yeah.
All right.
So
All right.
appreciate it.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.